The battles over voter ID laws are heading down to the wire as we approach Election Day. Will a zero-tolerance approach toward voter fraud eliminate a rarely committed crime? Would leaving laws alone give us election results that can't be trusted? Wendy Weiser, let me bring you back in at this point. There were states that were in the vanguard of passing these new requirements. Have they been a laboratory? Have there been an election or two now that we can look at the results and see what worked and what didn't work?
You know, we have seen recent results come out. The Government Accountability Office just issued a report looking at the impact of new strict ID requirements in Kansas and in Tennessee. And in both cases, it found a marked decrease in voter turnout that was attributable to those new strict photo ID requirements. And it's important to keep in mind that there are ID requirements and there are ID requirements. These new ID requirements that we are seeing in Texas, in Wisconsin, in Kansas, these are not the IDs that we've been using for years. These are much more restrictive and provide no opportunity for voters who don't have limited forms of IDs to find another way of identifying themselves. And as Judge Richard Posner, actually one of the leading conservative jurists and somebody who actually was the judge who upheld in the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals Indiana's voter ID law, said these laws are different. They're much more restrictive and they are not justified. They're not justifiable. They are just having the impact of depressing votes for no good reason.
Horace Cooper, I covered the Pennsylvania voter ID case at some length with repeated trips to the state, and it was interesting that the government there was willing to keep revising and moving the target in order to make the law stick. They really wanted to get those new laws into place, and with each new impediment they'd say, all right, we'll send around moving vans, we'll send people into neighborhoods, we'll bus people to places to get their photos taken. So what was originally billed as a money-saving measure in some instances ended up putting the state on the hook for potentially millions of dollars before the law didn't go into effect. It's hard to see. You talked earlier about the validity of the vote and wanting to restore confidence in it, and I don't think there's anybody who disagrees with that.
I do, but go on.
But there's an idea that when you pass a law, there has to be some suspicion that it's being broken in the first place in order to make sure you stamp this standard into place to make sure it's not being violated.
That's a made-up standard, and I would love it if that was the standard, if they stood at the door of the United States Capitol or state legislatures across the country and said, let's not have this new law because we haven't even demonstrated it's even being violated. The truth is, let's take something like felony kidnapping, a federal offense. There are fewer than half a dozen federal offenses a year in each state. Is that an argument because there's so few that we shouldn't have that particular crime? Let's take income tax fraud prosecutions. They're higher in the Obama administration than they are under Bush or Clinton, and yet there are fewer than 1,000 in a year nationwide. Let's talk about the big bank fraud that we saw American people have to bail out the banks for. There haven't even been a dozen prosecutions from all of that. Is that really the standard that we're supposed to be living by? That if we only see a few of these things happening, we need to go ahead on and shove that out the door? That's not the standard. That's never been the standard. And the bigger point is this. There are a lot of criticisms that I hear that are the kind that should be presented to a lawmaker, not to the courts. These are policy arguments, not legal questions.
Well, since you credited me with inventing a standard, I will point out that I didn't invent tax fraud, which goes on and has gone on since there have been taxes. Kidnapping, which has gone on since time immemorial, since that used to be the way people got married, frankly. And the idea that these things only, because they happen rarely, there shouldn't be laws against them, I don't think either of us believe that that's true.
I hear that all the time.
But in order to pass a law that puts the state on the hook, sometimes for an entire institutional remake, in order to get these heavily impacted populations IDs, well, doesn't there have to be a predicate, a reason in the first place to pass a law like this?
When I was a kid, the county that I lived in banned paper bags and told us to go to plastic bags. Today, we see a lot of more data and evidence, and now it's let's ban the plastic bags and let's go back to paper bags. The policy issues are important for legislatures to hear. My organization, the National Center, sent prior to the 2012 elections to the Justice Department. We asked them to send election observers to New Orleans, to Wisconsin, Milwaukee. We asked them to go to Philadelphia. We sent 7 places where we identified media reports that were current and asked them to investigate, to see to it that election fraud was not occurring. They said no. They did not send those people, and they were unconcerned about that. But this policy issue, they're concerned about. It is all about whose ox is getting gored. It appears that what we really want to say is this doesn't help Democrats, this does help Republicans. Now we have Johnny-come-latelys that want to claim that when a partisan advantage apparently appears, that's something that the courts are supposed to get involved in. That's absolutely not something the courts should be involved in.
Well, Ashley Spillane, partisan advantage or not, and yours is a nonpartisan organization, how do you respond to these laws? Can you help young voters negotiate them as we move closer to Election Day?
Yeah, we are trying to. They're tough, and the courts going back and forth is not helping anything right now. But we are, our mission is to build political power for young people. We are nonpartisan. We do not care what party you are voting for. We just want to make sure that young people's right to vote is protected and that they have access to all the information they need. And so right now our big focus on this election is making sure that they have up-to-date information, despite it changing frequently at this point, to make sure that people have what they need to go to the polls. It is disappointing to us to continue to see evidence that people will be disenfranchised by these stricter laws and to have them continue through the system. But we are optimistic about encouraging and inspiring young people to persevere in spite.
We'll be back with more Inside Story after a short break.